thing in this world that is most worthy to be praised is hardly ever praised. The one that provides the most hope is hardly ever sought by his own very own people. He says if my people would just humble themselves and pray, if they would seek my face by getting on theirs, I would heal them and I would heal their land. Man, God desires a people that are hungry for Him. Like, I pray and wish and desire that every Sunday morning, if you are a visitor and you walked into Victory Baptist Church, you would see a people that are starving to get more of God and just happy to worship and sing together to Him. The glorious Holy One, the perfect. Man, I just have a desire for us as a church to just be more engaged in our worship with our, not just singing, but in our Bible reading at home. More engaged in our worship, our lifestyle of worship. So that's just a little piece. All right, so let's go to 2 Samuel chapter 11. Last week, if you were with us, we talked about David, how he became the nation's hero to the nation's most wanted, right? 2 weeks ago, his wife had to pull a Ferris Bueller trick as she put a dummy in the bed with goat's hair, and he had to climb out the window, and he was running from Saul. Saul tried to spear him twice while he's playing him sweet music. Right? Just playing music, try to get speared. Saul also then sends David out to battle to try to kill him by the Philistine hand, but that only proved to fuel David's name more because David was very successful in battle. He was a warrior. He was a fighter. He was a great commander in the Israelite military. So everything that Saul tried to do to discredit David, to bring shame upon him, or to kill him, failed. And everything Satan tries to do, or this world, to disprove God, they failed. And they just show him more and more and more. More and more true, more and more real, faithful. So last week we talked about David was in hiding in the caves. And while he was in one of the caves, Saul came in to take the number 2, right? He came in to use the bathroom, and out of the thousands of caves and all the systems of caves that are in the Fertile Crescent, Solomon, with his thousands of troops, could not find David. Could not find him with all that manpower, looking into cave after cave after cave, with thousands of men, could not locate David. But then Saul walks into a cave to go to the bathroom, and there's David and his men. You see how God providentially brought Saul into the cave. We saw that last week, right? Just craziness. And David had an opportunity to kill him, and instead, kings would often take off their long robe when they went to use number 2. Another reason why I think it was a number 2, that's a different point. They would take off their long robes and leave them on the side. I just can't get over that fact, I'm sorry. Puts his robe on the side, and David cuts off a corner of it, right? Feels guilt about it because he thought it probably had temptation to kill Saul right then and there. And the other men beside him were going, dude, this has to be God. God had to have brought him in here. God had to have done this. This is your time, man. This is God's providence. You should do it. Kill him. Ascend to the throne. You go right from a cave to a palace. What are you waiting for? And David says, I will not put my hand against God's anointed. Saul was not like Goliath. Goliath was directly challenging Yahweh and saying that Dagon was better. So David knew, okay, God wants me to kill Goliath. But when it came to Saul, even though he was acting evil, still had an anointing on his life. He was still the king of Israel. In fact, he was still David's king. So David did not feel it right to go against what God had established and kill Saul. David is proven right in the next chapter when Nabal offends David, and instead of David thrusting his spear into Nabal's stomach, Nabal just drops down dead. And so David's like, yes, if God wants Saul dead, Saul will just die. So it's okay. You recording me? No, just kidding. So then again, David is being hunted by Saul, and so then the second time, David goes into his camp while Saul's sleeping, takes the spear by his head in the water jug, him and his commander. His commander wanted to kill Saul again, but David knew that Saul still had a part to play in God's story, whether for good or for evil. And so he did not put his hand against the Lord's anointed. David trusted in God, we said last week, with the entirety of his life. And if David was sleeping in the dirt, it's because God wanted it to be so. Because we're going to see today that David was actually more in tune with God when he was sleeping in the dirt in the cave than when he was sitting on his couch in the palace. Because that's where David commits his big fall. Okay? So David trusted in the Lord. We talked about his integrity. We talked about his goodness. We talked about how all these commanders and all these people just started following David naturally. He was a natural leader. And so as we see David kind of assume that, today the story is going to pick up in 2 Samuel 11 with David and Bathsheba. So just catching you up, Saul on Mount Gilboa dies. He's being surrounded. He didn't want to be killed by a weak Philistine, so he falls on his own sword. Basically, he starts to take his own life. Another guy comes up, finishes the job as he's suffering. Jonathan dies. David sins and becomes king of Israel after a whole bunch of stuff happened. David's finally king over Israel and Judah, and things are going well for him. He's conquering. Every spring, he would go out and conquer more territory. We said earlier that no king in Israel, current day Israel, 2018 Israel, does not have as much land as David had. David conquered far and wide and had the biggest territory Israel had ever seen. They were prominent. They were huge, becoming one of those top nations over in the Fertile Crescent, which is not easy to do when you're fighting Philistines and Babylonians are later, and Assyrians and Persians and all these big nations. Israel was a solid up-and-comer in the Fertile Crescent. So David had success, great success. Now today we're going to talk about just a piece. We're only going to do a couple verses of this because I couldn't get too far. But we're going to look, whatever David did, he did epically. If he was going to fight, he was going to kill 200 Philistines by his own sword. If he was going to build a wall, he was going to build the highest wall. David did everything to the extreme, kind of like Alex, right? If Alex is going to do something, he's going to go all out and go crazy and do it. Is anybody like that? If you're going to do something, you're like invested, you're going all in. Yeah, I see that. You're going all in. That's you. Well, that's good, but when it came to sin, David was all in. Okay? David did everything to the max, did everything to the extreme, and that was the truth when David sinned against the Lord. David had 1,000 sins, just like you and I, okay? But I don't know if you guys would let me become the pastor at Victory Baptist Church if I, in the interview, said, you asked me about my past and my history. I said, well, I raped a woman and I killed her husband. But, man, things have changed. Feeling like I'm in a good spot now, so things are good. I think the deacon board here would say, thanks for your time. We are praying for you. Get out fast, okay? They would be terrified. Okay? That's the kind of man we're talking about. David the Great. David was the man after God's own heart. How do we know that this story wasn't just written by somebody who tried to make David famous? Well, I don't think you would put this story in here. But that's the cool part about the Bible. The Bible is transparent. It paints no perfect picture of any human being. And we're going to see when David sins, he goes to the max. He goes to the extreme here. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. David's sin with Bathsheba. We're going to learn about the nature of sin and the nature of man a little bit. So let's jump right into it. David and Bathsheba. Look at 11 verse 1. In the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel. And they ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah. But David remained at Jerusalem. David remained at Jerusalem. So every spring in Israel, kind of like the Civil War, every spring kings would go out to battle. That was a logical time for war. The snow has melted, the cold weather, the crops are now starting to come back. So now as your troops, You muster up your troops and they travel. They were able to eat grain that is growing. It was a good time to expand your kingdom and to meet other kings at war. We see that in 1 Kings 20, verse 22 and 26. Other kings going out to war. So kings went out because they had to. Other kings were coming out against you with their soldiers, so you had to respond and go out with your men. Everybody fought in spring. A lot of widows there were every spring. Fresh new crop of widows, because that's when the battles were raging and they were just going at each other. So David should have went out every spring like he did every year. He should have went, but instead he stays at home and he sends Joab. David was a proven fighter. He didn't have anything else to prove here, right? He's already defeated Goliath. He's fought all the other commanders and the Philistines, and he was a man of war. Why did he not go? Why did he send Joab? Maybe it was his pride that kept him back. You know what? I've done enough for Israel. I've expanded so much. I'm tired of putting myself out there. I'm going to stay at home and I'm going to send all my armies to go fight. I'm the king. I'm going to sit back and I'm going to relax. It's time to crack a beer, sit on my couch, and watch SportsCenter. Right? That maybe was that David's mind? I don't know. David just wanted to hang out and not go to war. Instead, he sent one of his top commanders, Joab. Maybe it was his pride. I don't know. But whatever it is, the king passed up on his responsibility. He put his responsibility, when he should have went to war, on someone else, and they went. When you let someone else steer the ship, it may end up lost. Okay? So let me tell you a little bit about my house. Brittany handles bills. Brittany handles anything that requires money, because if I do it, it's going to just cost us a lot more money in the end. Okay? Working on my passport, I'm just like, well, cool. I saw something online, said click here and get it like in 14 days. I'm like, well, I think I'd rather do that than something else. There's this whole page on all this stuff, and I'm like, yeah, scroll down, click, put all my information in. I pay like 180 bucks. I'm like, wow, that's expensive. But I was like, yeah, 14 days, I'll get it, boom, done. And then I'm like, something's off. I call them, I owe like another 180 bucks. I didn't see on there. And it was just crazy. This passport is going to cost me like 500 bucks. And I was like, Brittany, she's like, oh, you should have just let me have done it. Right, so we got like $60 back. I had to call them, had to get them. They're like, well, your husband signed the box that he read and understood all these things. That's because I don't read. I don't care what this is saying. Brittany should have drove. That's what I'm saying. Brittany should have just been like, you know what, I'm going to take care of this. And now she's learned. I cost us a lot of money when I do that stuff. And that's why we have an awesome deacon board, right? These guys steer me in the right direction. I'm like, all right, let's just get it done. Okay, anyways. When you let someone else drive, you may not like where you end up. Anyways, okay, so jumping into it. David, why did he not go to war? And I think we can see it in the text. I think David had a season of just wanting to be all out lazy. I have worked, I have conquered. I'm going to take this season off. I'm going to sit back and do me. I'm going to relax. I'm going to enjoy myself. We see that because he's actually on the couch in the afternoon. What does a king do? Is he working with his people? Is he getting grain? Is he like helping the homeless? No, he's chilling out on his couch. While his men were out at war, fighting and sleeping in the mud and risking their lives, David is laying on his couch, not in the morning when he woke up, but this story takes place towards the evening. So have you ever had those days? And don't lie to me. Who loves those days when you're laying on the couch all day, right? Like a winter day and it's raining and you just want to lay there. Thank you, Matt, for being the only honest one in here. Okay, I love it. So David's on the couch in the afternoon, probably in his PJs, sitting back, relaxing, and he doesn't go to war. David was one of the most active kings, but this season of idleness, don't miss this season and moments of idleness and laziness was almost his undoing. What seemed completely harmless and acceptable was a catalyst to one of David's biggest downfalls. And when anybody in the secular world talks about David, and I ask people, what do you know about David? They talk about Bathsheba. They know about this. David's season of idleness led him to this great disaster. So being idle and being sluggish is a sin, right? We see that in Proverbs 26, 13 through 16. Listen to this. The sluggard says, there is a lion on the road. A lion is in the open square. As the door turns on its hinges, so does the sluggard in his bed. The sluggard buries his hand in the dish, and he is weary to bring it again to his mouth. You know who wrote that? David's son, Solomon. Talking about the sluggard. The lazy man will make any excuse to get out of work. An excuse that's even at the highest in probability. There was a lion outside. I can't go cut grass. I might get attacked by rattlesnakes. I'm not cutting grass today. That's what the sluggard and the idle man does. He makes excuse after excuse. And he is so weary of laying in his bed, even feeding himself becomes a chore. You ever felt that way? It's hard to get your hand to your mouth. You know, like when you play the Wii, the first couple times you're like up and jumping, and then you're playing the Wii on the couch, just like not moving, right? Because you're just like, okay, I'm over this, and you just want to do these little, like, smallest hand motions. Well, that's true of idleness. It just makes you more and more lazy, and the smallest tasks make you more tired. But David had this season of being idle and lazy, and it led his mind and his soul into a whole big mess. Okay? David's sins, like all sins, come in layers. And here was the first part of the layer. Before we look at the rape, before we look at the lies and the murder, we need to look at this seemingly harmful little sin called being idle. Not doing what you're supposed to do and passing your responsibility to someone else. This sin is the foundation of what lies ahead for David. So he should have went. He stayed back. He's hanging out. Boom. It happens. I don't know if you feel like you're an idle person. Sometimes you're lazy. Sometimes you just don't know the direction of what God wants you to do, and so you just sit back and wait. But as we sit back and as we wait, and as we make committees about what we should do, maybe we should just start doing and do the responsibility and the things that God has already called you to do. Just start doing it. Don't wait on someone else to tell you what to do. Just start doing it. Get to work. All right, let's look at this. Verse 2. It happened late one afternoon when David arose from his couch and was walking on the roof of the king's house, that he saw from the roof a woman bathing. And the woman was very beautiful. And David sent and inquired about the woman, and one said, "Is not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Elam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" So David had sent messengers and took her, and she came to him, and he lay with her. Now she had been purifying herself from her uncleanliness. Then she returned to her house, and the woman conceived, and she sent and told David, "I am pregnant." Uh-oh. Okay. Let's look at this. So Bathsheba, she is the wife of Uriah, and she's actually not mentioned again until the end of the chapter. She's just referred to as the wife of Uriah, or the wife, the lady. Her name doesn't come back in. So the focus of the text is that she's happily married woman. She's a married woman. She's taking a bath on the roof, okay? This wasn't some kind of ancient thing where all the women took baths on the roofs, okay? That's wasn't a thing in the context there. It was uncommon. So Bathsheba wasn't just cleaning herself or taking a normal bath. She was performing a purifying ceremony after her cycle. Okay? After her cycle, there was Levitical laws about times of impurity and cleaning yourself, and even laws about having sex like 7 days later. So she's performing the rites and cleaning herself, being very cleanly, and doing what she's supposed to do. Bathsheba was probably just, why did she go up to the roof, right? Some people claim that she was the seducer, that she did this to David, but no. She suspected that all the men were out fighting. That's where they should have been. They should have been gone. They should have been out doing what they were supposed to do. And most of them were, except for who? David. He stayed behind. So she's like, you know what? I'm going to take this up to the roof, watch the sunset. It's going to be a nice day. And she is caught and seen by David. Sometimes we can do some careless things, right? Careless actions. We don't think anybody's going to see or notice, and it can actually get us in trouble, right? I'm not giving you any stories on that, though I could. I got a few on Nate too about that, but I will not do that. Bathsheba was just enjoying herself and having a good time. So David, it says that David then sees her. David sees her. In the silhouette, the sun is going down, maybe even in the moonlight. He sees this woman who lives near the palace, shows us that she had some money, right? They were wealthy. She was next to him, and he could see her on the roof. She lived close to the palace. So David, it says, he looks on her beauty, and the frenzy begins. The infection of his head, and he goes into a trance-like state. It didn't take a flirty conversation with Bathsheba. It didn't take an emotional touch from Bathsheba. For a man, right, it doesn't take much. We just need the eyes. That's all it takes for a man, for just crazy lust in his brain and in his mind to just go after her. And that's exactly what happens. It didn't take some kind of flirty conversation. This is where men and women can be different, okay? Not always, but mostly. Men, ladies, you know how different you and your husband are, okay? A man is a microwave. A woman is like a crock pot, okay? Man, boom, good. Okay, you got me? You know what I'm saying? Okay? Microwave, crock pot. Remember that. But David sees her, and that's all it takes. Isn't that crazy what our eyes make our minds do? It's just infectious. It just is in his head. He can't get it out. This is why pornography has so much success in today, right? It doesn't take them like saying your name or getting more information about you and what you like or don't like. It's just vision, just the eyes of what you can see. Her physical beauty caused David to look away from God's beauty. Notice how it takes one beauty from his heart was on God. I love you, Lord. I'm going to keep your law. I'm going to keep your precepts. And then immediately he goes from beauty to this beauty. And he forgets about that beauty. In Matthew 6, 22 through 23, it says, "The eye is the lamp of the body, and if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is that darkness?" Have you heard the song, "Be careful, little eyes, what you see? Be careful, little eyes, what you see"? David, we can make another observation about this, that when David saw Bathsheba, that he forgot about his other wives, right? Now, David had more than one wife, right? Obviously not the design that God had, and his son followed in his footsteps and had a lot more women than David had. But David even forgets, when he sees that woman, he forgets about what he's already had, or what he already has. He has the daughter of King Saul. He has Nabal's wife, and after Nabal died, he takes her. So we know he's got two wives right now, but he immediately is not satisfied with what he had and thinks that by getting her, things will be better. These are the lies of sin. David had a beautiful wife, daughter of the king. And the lie of sin was that what he had wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. It wasn't measuring up. How many divorces happen because you just believe the lie that what you have isn't enough and will never be what you want it to be. And the grass is greener on the other side. And then you find out later in that marriage that, every person can become common to you. Isn't that the sad thing? We're talking about living in a beautiful place with a beautiful view. And even just if you moved to Alaska and you stared at this one snow-capped mountain, even that view would become common to you, and you would long to see other things. Even the most miraculous of sights can become common and not as exciting to us anymore. And so that's what that can happen. So David just forgot about the beauty and the internalness of his wife, how beautiful her heart and soul is, and is just looking to gratify himself and forgets what he has. David believed he could only be satisfied by Bathsheba in that moment. And he is going to spend the rest of his life regretting what he did. So it really doesn't seem that Bathsheba was that satisfying if he lives a life full of regret. She was the ultimate for him. He had to have her. So what does David do? He sees her, and then he inquires about her. So the frenzy starts in his mind, and now he starts asking questions, okay? David moves from fixation to plans. Okay, now let's find out who she is. He didn't see no hubby up there on the roof, right? Is she alone? What's she doing there? Is she a servant? Let's find out. So he finds out something horrible. Some bad news for him. She's actually married, okay? So for the king, that's bad news. But what's really bad news is who she's married to. This is insane. She is married to Uriah the Hittite. That is no mere guy, okay? Uriah's name means the Lord is my light. He is a faithful and true servant of Israel, a man of honor and integrity. He was truly a great, great man. And he was a man, one of 30 of David's elite forces. If you go over to chapter 23, you don't have to, but chapter 23, verse 39. It's going to list David's best warriors, right? And they're called the 30. So if you were a soldier, right? He was more than just a common soldier. He was one of the 30. And you don't get to be one of David's 30 without proving loyalty to the king and proving yourself in battle. Uriah was a military guy who was faithful and true and was so skilled in war, he got the title of the 30. These guys were larger than life. If you know David's 3 mighty men, each of them killing hundreds by themselves in a single battle. And they attained to the status of the 3. And then outside of the 3, we got the 30, and then the rest of Israel. If you were named in the 30, you were elite. Of the Navy SEALs, there are over 2,400 active duty Navy SEALs right now. That's very, very small. That's 1% of the entire Navy. 1%. 1% of the entire Navy could actually become a Navy SEAL and perform. A lot of them don't make it through training. Some of them even die in training, which is insane. Just elite forces, just very small. And that's exactly who Uriah was. He was a commander, he was a leader, he was a fighter. And David, when he found out this news of who Uriah is, he should have stopped immediately. But he didn't. So I think we can say, and maybe you can prove this to be true in your life, that sin causes you to do irrational things. Sin causes you to do some pretty dumb stuff and to make some pretty dumb excuses and to do some shady things to cover up. Sin led him to do irrational things. Ooh, that's Uriah's wife? Yep, don't care, bring her. He didn't even think twice. He just found out. And even the messenger goes, isn't that Uriah? Isn't that Bathsheba? Isn't he Uriah's wife? And so the messenger's trying to say, hey, bro, I just don't... You feel like that question is more of a... just calling him out and saying, man, I don't think you should do this. But David should have stopped, but he didn't. And so what's the next part? Fixation, planning, now action. And now David summons her. He summons her. David involves other people. So how far away did she live? He could see her from his roof. He could have just walked over and said, hey, come here. But instead, he gets other people involved. That way, maybe if other people saw her being summoned, other guys bringing her, maybe David's not going to be at fault. He's involving other people in his plot and trying to cover this up. And he brings her to him. So my question here was, and I try to look through the commentaries, was Bathsheba at fault? Could she have refused the king? Maybe. Maybe she could have, and maybe there's a little bit in her that that was wrong, but also we see that Bathsheba comes, and does she really have a choice? If the king says, do this, does she really have a choice? And David put I'm sure, all his authority that God gave him into this situation. All his authority into this. People use their power and their position for all kinds of evil and treachery. If we were going to make a list of the most evil people in the world who have ever lived, you better believe that most of those are going to be people who have had money and power. Because when people have money and power, they are unrestrained. And they can do some crazy things with the power and the money that they have. And David does the same thing. He uses his authority and his power to get what he wants. Instead of using it for God's glory and God's good, he uses it for his own advantage, and he sleeps with her. And then notice immediately what he does. Does he cuddle with her? Does he say, as he's trying to start this beautiful relationship? No, it says he sent her back home. And that's all he had in his mind. He satisfied what he wanted, and he sent her back home. No emotional connection. He just sends her back. And the next time he has to talk with her is when they're on Jerry Springer. I'm pregnant. Or that's Maury. You are the father, right? That's Maury. That's the next time he speaks with her. No emotional attachment. Just sends her back home and uses her. I often ask men who are struggling with pornography if they care about the soul of that woman on the screen. Does she have a soul? Does she have a heart? Or are you just looking at the outside and care if she goes to hell or not? You think about that while you're watching pornography? I doubt it. I doubt it. And David doesn't care about who she is, just what's on the outside. David sends her back home. Best believe when Raleigh brings a boyfriend home, we're going to be looking at 2 Samuel chapter 11. We're going to expound it. Probably going to make him watch this video. And then we're going to talk about it. Lord help me. Okay, I'm terrified. Okay, so David sends her home. She becomes pregnant. How do we know that David's the father? Well, we know this because of a little detail that the book gives us. She just was come off of her cycle. She was doing the purifying. So Uriah didn't impregnate her before he went to war. No, she became pregnant, and it is clear that David's the father. You don't bring that accusation against the king. Hey, I'm pregnant, and I think it's yours. You don't just do that against the king. So David is left with this situation on his hands. And instead of confessing and falling before the Lord and repenting to God and Uriah and the prophet Nathan, he doesn't have these plans for repentance. He plans to cover it up. Because according to Leviticus, what is the punishment for adultery? Death. Death. But instead of David dying, who dies? Uriah. Let's wrap this up today. David was a man after God's own heart. David, who believed in God, trusted in God, owed God his life. God brought him out of the cave, saved him from Saul's hand, saved him from Goliath's hand, redeemed this kid, called him to the throne of God, to the